Well, hello, you clever people, and welcome to Pro Tools Answers, where three resident Pro Tools experts and Avid instructors discuss, demonstrate, and elaborate on your Pro Tools questions put to the community in the official Avid Facebook support forum. I'm your host, Dave Phillips, audio engineer and lecturer for Point Blank in the UK. And today we are tackling a question about managing the preset list in plugins from Robert, who asks this. Does anyone know how to get my preset list drop down instead of the default label to keep popping up? I have a 50-50 chance of getting my preset list. I know this is probably Pro Tools 101, so Dave can probably answer it pretty easily, but I can't find the answers anywhere, so we have to default to Anders and Andy. And speaking of which, with me as ever are my two master buddies who you'd never argue if they popped up by default. Send love out to Anders Mutz at Tonkraftwerk in Austria.
Hi, Dave.
And Andy Hageman, Avid's audio curriculum manager over in Tokyo. Andy.
How's it going, man?
Before we start, I just want to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters who are, of course, in every sense of the word, supporting us every month. Thank you so much to Don, Mike, Matthew, Gregor, Eric, and Kenny. As always, we're so grateful for your support, guys. And we'd just like to thank Kenny for his lovely message that he sent us over on our Instagram feed. Kenny, you are so welcome for all of the help that we give to you, and we're so grateful to your support as well. If anybody else would like to support us at our weekly work at Pro Tools Answers, you can head over to patreon.com/Pro Tools Answers, and you can pick a manageable Patreon tier over there. If you wanted to make a one-time donation to the channel, you can head over to protoolsanswers.com, and you can do so via PayPal over there. So today we are talking about plugin presets and how we can manage our plugin presets. Now, what it sounds, I think we've had a little bit of a discussion, as we normally do, about what we think that Robert means in his question. And the way I'm interpreting this is that when you open up, oh, hold on a second, let me do the magic thing.
It's a new year.
New year, new me. I'm trying to be better. So what?
How is that even possible, Dave?
Well, because you just teach me so incredibly well, Anders. The thing is that it just takes 49 shows for it to go in. So what happens when you open up a plugin, brand new, we can see the preset list up here. Oh, I've opened a non-Avid one. I've opened PSP's Neon. And what we're seeing is that we get a default preset. Basically, the plugin will open up with no settings whatsoever. And this will typically be the default. And if we open an Avid-based one, and we open up our preset list, we see presets. And I think what seems to be the case is that Robert seems to wants to open a particular plugin. Maybe it's every plugin he wants a particular default setting to open up on. He wants to open up his plugin and have a particular preset loaded up. Is that the way that you interpret this, guys?
I think so. But I'm only about 50% convinced that I'm right.
But so was he.
I think that's what he wants.
50-50, right?
Yeah.
So,
okay, so what are we going to talk about during this episode? We're going to talk about how we can set the presets. And we're going to expand, and we're going to talk about how we can save presets and how we can manage presets.
But there's a question, can you change the factory default setting to be something else? So that it isn't a flat EQ, for instance, in EQ3?
Shall we have a look at that?
Yeah, sure.
So very briefly, I've just selected a chorus setting in Mod Delay 3, which, by the way, I think is an excellent delay unit. How about you? I use this on everything.
It's actually pretty good.
I love it.
Yep.
And so we've selected chorus as a preset. Now, if we head up to this little disclosure it's not a disclosure triangle, is it? It's a menu triangle, and we'll head to
pop-up menu button,
settings, preferences. We can just navigate over to the right hand side, and it says set the plugin default to either the factory setting, which typically is null on everything, or our user setting. So if I click on user setting, is that now going to set every time I load up Mod Delay 3? Is this going to bring chorus as my default setting?
Almost. Go back to the pop-up menu.
Mm-hmm.
and you will, if you see over there, set as user default. Now it will. So you click that.
So that's the one.
Yeah.
And then we'll
Yeah.
just create ourselves a new version. And there we go. We have Chorus popping up automatically.
Yeah. So
Fantastic.
basically, it's a two-step thing, right? So first thing, you set your user default, right? So you choose whatever, and by the way, you chose a preset that that already comes with the plugin. You could create your own
already
preset,
existing.
right? And set that so you could save your own custom settings, save it as a preset, then choose that preset as your user default. That's step one. Step two then is that bottom menu that you went to, the initial plugin. I don't know how it reads. Plugin default to, plugins default to your user settings, and then it will call upon the other setting that you have, and that will go for every instantiation of that plugin from this point forward.
Indeed. But it's probably important to mention with the third-party stuff where we have a completely separate preset manager. So on PSP's Neon here, it's all of the management for the plugin is done in another. Well, it's not. It is another area. It's just two ways of doing it, right? So setting that's not necessarily going to be the default one if we just go and set the default. But we need it.
But you could, if you go back up to the pop-up menu, save settings as.
Exactly.
Second one down. Yeah, you knew that already.
I did. I was baiting you. So
Again?
So we'll obviously set a default a preset in here. We can save it into the plugins library if we wanted to, but we just also need to save it again up in here and then set it as a user default.
And then set that plugin to recall. There you go. User setting. There we go.
User setting set as default. So it's a little added complexity when we're using third-party stuff.
Third-party stuff that aren't a true AX plugin that uses the AX library, right? Because some of them do, because even though they're third-party, and some of them don't, like Waves and PSP.
By the
Am I
way,
correct?
just to yes, you're 100% right. Just to go back to the person who was asking the question, that's a pretty deep question right there. That's definitely not a 101 question. So Mazel Tov, that's a good one.
Yeah, feel good about yourself.
Feel good about yourself.
So where can we go from here? Should we talk about managing the preset list?
So
Yeah, sure. I think
So there's
that's
two-
an added
yeah, go
topic.
so there's two things, so if you go, this question is kind of about making, generally speaking, your life with plugins a little bit more automatic. And there's two places that I want to direct your attention to. So one is in your preferences. If you go to mixing, I think. Yeah, there we go. You can choose a default EQ and a default dynamic plugin. And so let's see here. Let's go with FabFilter as my default EQ. And let's go with the Pro compressor. With
Great
this.
choices.
Okay.
Two very good choices.
And by the way, you could choose the slot that you want to put them into. If you choose none, then that's usually where I go with that. But let's go with that. What does that do? Well, if you've got a control surface like the Icon or the S6, you can recall them super quickly from the buttons. But even if you don't have that, then when you go here, you'll see at the very top here, you've got FabFilter and Pro Compressor. You don't have to go into the menus. That's step one. But let's say here, what's another plugin that you really like, Dave? Let's
In your list, let's. Can you go to compressors? Let's see what you've got in your compression
There we
list.
go.
So I really, 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 really like.
The MC77 is a great compressor.
Your FabFilter Pro G.
Okay, FabFilter Pro G. Boom. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Command key on a Windows computer or the control key on command key on a Mac or the control key on a Windows computer, I'm going to go ahead and just click this. Boom. It doesn't open up the plugin, interestingly enough. But what you're going to see here is if I go here, you're going to see FabFilter and Pro Compressor because those are the defaults that I chose in my preferences. But then when I go to plugins, you're going to see any other of the plugins that I've got that I've pushed up to this. And this, it can be from anywhere. So if I wanted to, every teacher loves Signal Generator because it's just so easy to use. Boom, I could pop that. And now that is going to be at the top here. I want to take away Channel Strip from that list. I hold down, again, Command or Control on a Windows machine. Hit Command click on that, and I've removed that from the list.
By the way, I think it's a genius move to have the channel strip as one of your two plugins for dynamics or EQ, because when you're inserting the default dynamics or the default EQ from the S6 or S4 or something like that, basically you just get that plugin, but that's two plugins in one, right? It's an EQ and dynamics, so you cheat the system in a way.
Well, it's a compressor and an expander. And EQ and low pass and high pass filters. Yeah, it's a very powerful plugin that I think because it's free, people tend to overlook. But that's the same guts as the Euphonics System 5 was, which is a very, very well known and highly regarded service.
Andy, don't talk too loudly about the channel strip plugin because it's my secret weapon that nobody knows about.
It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that people just seem to bypass it and don't really notice what it is because it's so good.
Great. Yeah,
it's such a good. I'll tell you what, and one of the things I like about that, we're going completely off topic, is the fact that you can change the high pass and low pass filters and still see the original underlying EQ curve. It's
fantastic. And you can get the most narrow notches ever.
Oh yeah, completely.
Yeah, it's fantastic. By the way, Andy, that was a really, really cool trick when you're holding Command and clicking on a plugin to get it on top.
Yeah.
Can you show your screen again, or should I?
How many plugins can you represent in that favorites list, Andy?
I don't think there's a limit. You could try putting all of them in there.
Yeah, I can see this getting kind of unwieldy. I can see that particular, because this is relatively new, isn't it? And I can see this being, I can see it being developed a little more as.
I think that's a great feature because you can take your best one. Did you know that you can do this in the audio suite list as well? So if you go to the audio suite folder up there, and if you hold Command while clicking one of those, so that one will show up in its separate little list ahead. I love that.
Yeah, so I mean, the rule of thumb here is you don't want it to get so. I mean, this is your favorites that you use very, very frequently. I mean, if you put 20 in there, then it kind of defeats the purpose of speeding things up. But it's just it's one of those things. So if you've got a plugin like Channel Strip or something like that you're going to get to, and if you can get it to open up with the user default that you like, well, you're cooking with steam. You're moving fast at that point, which is great. That's what we all want, is to stop fighting the technology and get to the fun stuff.
Yeah, we just want to make great audio, right? So if you go into that preset drop-down again, Andy, I mean, there are two different things here to look out for in the settings preferences there. So you have the plug-in default to, which we talked about, but then there's the save plugin settings too. And the root settings folder here is basically a system-wide folder that every session on your system has access to, where your settings for each plugin, your presets and everything that you do get saved. But if you save directly into the session folders, what happens is Pro Tools will create a subfolder in your session folder where it saves your sessions for. And what's that usable for? What's the purpose of that?
So we were having a discussion on this about how we use this. If you choose save plugin settings to your session folder, which I don't do, I'll be honest. I typically will not. One of the things that is nice about that is it's now in a subfolder of your session called plugin settings, right? So you could then, if you're saving to a removable hard drive, then you just unplug your hard drive, you move it to another studio, and if that studio doesn't have that plugin preset, then you're good to go. That's no problem. Okay. However, if you save to the session folder and you unplug that hard drive and you go to another studio, on the system that you took it away from, that setting does not exist. So Dave, I think you said you don't save to the session folder. I don't either. Anders,
no, I don't. I'd like, because for me, if I load the session up, the settings are going to be there. I can extract them from that. If I save them to the root folder, they're going to be in Pro Tools as well anyway. I can't get my head around a workflow where I'd want to save settings specifically into a folder. Although I'm grasping onto your reasoning just a little bit, but I can't contextualize that for my lifestyle.
I can contextualize, but probably not applicable to your lifestyle, as you say. So let's say you have a shared folder and you're working on a project to someone or a session with some other editors. Someone is doing one kind of audio task and someone is doing some other. And if you save into the sessions folder, everyone has access to your settings, right? If you do it on your root settings folder, you might have a more difficult time transferring plugin settings presets to other systems. But what possible other alternatives do we have? We can, of course, also drag around and copy presets, right? Because they are actually files that reside on your hard drive.
And we can go and find those in a minute.
So I think that saving to your session folder is somewhat vestigial, because if you cast your mind back, save session copy used to be a lot more primitive than it is now.
Yeah.
Right, and so people would save to their session folder. Sometimes, Anders, to keep things simple, in a shared folder kind of workflow. But usually it was for portability, at least from my experience. But now I don't have to do that, because if I save session copy in, and again we're veering wildly off track, you can include in your copy not only the root, not only the session plugin folder, but also the root plugin settings folder.
Yep.
So that right there, and it copies everything. Copies everything that's in your root folder. So you basically have taken a snapshot of all your plugin presets at the time that you archived this session, which is, and it sounds like a lot of presets. It is, but it's not going to take up a lot of space.
I think if there was a preset that you really cared about and really cared about keeping, you'd spend a couple of minutes just dragging it into a space, a key.
You might, yeah.
A deposit of all of your favorites.
You're probably right. So getting back to a question that I asked Dave in the beginning, could you save over the factory default so that you have, let's say, a high pass filter on your default setting?
Well, I would say so, because I can just make a
so what happens if you go back to the factory default, and now you create a high pass filter like that?
Yep.
And what if you save now? Just go into drop down and save the settings. Okay, will this be your new factory default now?
Oh, now I understand.
So this gives you a little bit of a clue. It's asking you to save the settings as something.
So I go with no.
But I mean, could you save over the default file?
But is there a default file?
Let's find out. We'll go here.
But now you saved it as a new name.
No,
what if you save over
yes.
factory default? Just save settings. You can't.
You can't. So if I go to save settings, it's going to ask me to save something. It's going to be ask me to save as something, right?
Okay.
So if I go over, so if I can then open up Trash Me, which now is in my list, and I change it to do something like what Andrew says is your wonderful limiting of these things. And now if I go ahead here and save these settings,
Everyone needs
I do
that as
that.
their default.
it's completely useful. When this represents the hearing range of the average 56-year-old rock and roll musician.
I'm pretty sure that's what Keith Richards hears.
But yeah, so if I have a preset here, and I hit save, then yes, it's going to overwrite in this sense, trash me. But if you go to your factory default, and I wasn't, I'll be honest, Andrews, I thought I knew the answer to this. I wasn't 100% sure, so I didn't pop up. So if I change something here, and I try to save over factory default, and I go to save settings, it says nope, got to name it as something.
Okay.
And if you go in here, I don't think there's actually a file called factory default.
Default, there isn't one,
No.
right?
No. I think that I'm pretty sure. Well, I'm fairly positive that that's all hard coded into the plugin itself.
Yeah, okay.
And factory default is factory default is factory default.
Okay, great.
Awesome. So we talked about saving presets into the plugin, and we saw some file structure involved in that. So where can we actually find these, and where can we manage them? Because we definitely need to get rid of that trash me setting. No offense, Andy.
I think it's gold. I think it's gold. So it's in users, documents, and Pro Tools. So, and this changes a little bit, and I don't know quite off the top of my head where it is on a Windows machine. Andrews, do you know?
Yeah, it's in it's in the exactly corresponding place. So it's login specific, meaning if I'm working on the same computer as someone else that uses a separate log on to that computer, they don't have access to my root settings folder. And that's, of course, the advantage of using the save setting in the session if you're working on something on the same machine or another machine that people have mutual access to. You understand what I mean there? Because if I would set up two accounts on my computer and Dave uses my computer and I'm using it, we don't have the same settings folders access to those because they are in my specific logon. Yeah.
So that changes a little bit, actually. Can I wrestle the screen from you, Andy?
Sure.
If I go back to...
I love these kinds of conversations.
I love
I was
it.
grumpy before. I'm happier now.
See, I told you, Anders, we are Andy's
Yeah.
therapy.
Completely.
The bill is in the mail. Considering it's going to Tokyo, it'll get there in a month. So, if we're talking about the plugin specific library here, my PSP one down there, that's going to be ever so slightly different, though, isn't it? Now, where can I actually save these? Right, there we go. So, okay, so for Neon, that's going to be in there. Let's have a look at the little altar boy. We click on the disk icon there. This is actually saved in the shared folder for me. So this would actually be accessible to everybody. But this is the plugin specific. I suppose it's plugin specific in the other way as well. This is just the other storage system.
Yeah.
So
It makes me a little crazy because I love, one of the nice things about your plugin settings for Avid compliant plugins, fully AAX plugins, is they're all in one place. And so, every once in a while we have to tear our systems down and build them back up. I know where all of my plugin settings should be, but some of them are going to be in different places, which is a little bit maddening.
Yeah, if you're tearing a system, I've actually got to do that with my other Mac as soon as I finish with a project because it needs a good old restart. I'll be taking a copy of this specifically, so I can just dump it all back on.
But if you go ahead and cancel out of there, and if you change so for example, call up a setting in Little Altar Boy, which is a fantastic plugin, by the way. Great, so we've got that. Now save it from the top. Now if you save that setting,
Yes, that will look.
then it's going to save in. It saves in the default location. in the
Yes.
Avid default location.
So
In your-
it's a complexity to be aware of, isn't it? That you've got two areas that you can store plugin settings in, and I would argue that this is definitely the better place to store stuff.
It's more consistent for sure.
Consistent, great word. Yes.
The hobgoblin of small models.
Okay. Anything more to discuss?
No, let us know if we missed something.
Yeah, please.
I think we've got everything. I think we've talked about the default setting, how to save settings, how to then have that particular setting that you just saved be your default when you load the plugin up, and how to manage, get rid of, whatnot, settings that you make. So I think this is as complete as we can certainly make it for today. But as Anders says, if we have indeed missed anything, you are more than welcome to call us out in the comments below. but be nice. New year.
Be nice.
Everyone is
New-
always
yeah.
nice in the comments.
Everybody. You know what?
yeah.
Really, everybody is kind of nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a great
So
time.
far.
So, all leaves me to say is if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, you're getting a lot from us. If you're a Pro Tools user, we just talk about Pro Tools. We tell you how to do simple stuff. That's why I'm here. And we talk about how to do the clever stuff, which is why
That's Andy.
those two guys are here. And so you can subscribe to YouTube, hit the bell icon so you get notified every time we upload some new stuff. You can head over to protoolsanswers.com and you can subscribe over there. Andy writes to you each week. There's a couple of little gifts that he sticks in that email as well, that are always worth getting hold of. And if you fancied supporting us at Pro Tools Answers, you can do so at protoolsanswers.com with a one-time donation via PayPal, or you can head to patreon.com/Pro Tools Answers, where you can support us over there. But at protoolsanswers.com, you can get some pretty cool swag, which is something like what Anders is modeling at the moment.
And we're not wearing it. We're not wearing our
No.
gang colors today, Dave.
No, it's a pajama day today, Andy. Not gonna lie.
Nice.
We're off work. It's a pajama day. So all leaves me to say is thank you very much to you guys for joining us. Thank you very much to Anders.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Andy.
You bet.
My name's Dave. This is Pro Tools Answers, and we're out.